Everyone, and welcome to EdPost Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about artificial intelligence, AI in education. And my guest today is Jamie Nuñez, and he is the Western Regional Manager at Common Sense Media. He supports educators, districts, and state education agencies in incorporating digital literacy skills. He is a former high school teacher. Was a school administrator and a nonprofit education director. Jamie has trained thousands of educators and administrators on student engagement in digital spaces. So welcome, Jamie. So glad to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time. And first things first, I'd like to open it up to you so you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and the work that you're doing at Common Sense and beyond.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lisa. Lots of love to you. Happy Friday to you. I really appreciate the introduction and the connection and just being here. I'm actually really thrilled. Let's see, what can I share about myself that hasn't already been shared in public? One of the major through lines as a professional and the things that I carry in my role is this idea that our students have not only agency, but they also have voice in online spaces. And so as much as I can, I attempt to draw out, wean out some of those voices in educational spaces. So as we think about, supporting our students, the hope here is that I can provide some insight into what our students are thinking about ed tech or insights into education as a whole. My work at Common Sense is primarily supporting education agencies. That means states that are addressing digital literacy, school districts that are grappling with things like AI or how to address cell phone bans in the classroom. And I also support families as they think about what is the right media for them and how to support the educational endeavors that are happening when they involve technology. So sort of in a nutshell. Personally, let's see, I've been attempting to help my child learn to surf and swim for many, many years. And I'm a very big advocate of using cold water and engaging my child in sort of cold ocean water here in San Francisco. So I like to smile a lot, and I'm very, very passionate about helping educators think about technology in a way that actually supports their students. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And you do what you're doing with Common Sense is fantastic, and it's a well-known group that has been a go-to for a lot of educators and parents for so many years. When we're talking about the tools that are best for us to use for educational purposes, and also to give us some warnings about safety for kids, what's age appropriate for kids, and where we should put up the flags. This might not be a good thing for your kid at this particular age. So to have you weighing in AI and these type of tech tools is such a gift. So thank you for the work that you're doing in that space, because I know that even though we've been looking forward to the time when we would have life made a little bit easier by technology and robots, I think back to my childhood, the Jetsons and those type of things. We're not as far ahead as we thought we'd be by now. But it is a little frightening when you start to see all the things that can happen in the world are not so great when we look at technology. When you're looking at the deep fakes, and you're looking at the way people can be, dealing in fraud in the different AI spaces where you can just create things that out of nothing that didn't exist before. So it has this exciting element to it and so much potential, but it also has a little dark side to it. And here it is in our schools. Now, you mentioned cell phones, and it takes me back to the time when we tried to ban the internet, right? We tried to block all these sites. And then we tried to ban cell phones in schools, and we saw how well both of those things work. And the first knee-jerk reaction is to ban AI. We can't use this. It's too dangerous. And what we've learned over time is this is not going to work. We cannot ban this thing. It's coming down the track, and it's headed straight for us. So we may as well take a look at it in a smart way and figure out how to use it. So what would you tell schools that are in this predicament right now and say, here comes AI? What is the best way to start looking at this technology as a way to improve teaching and learning in schools?
I mean, you summarize the entire sort of model around what disruption and what banning looks like, right? I remember the TI-83, remember when we wanted to ban sort of those calculators? So, first of all, I want to empathize with the school administrators that are out there, because it is a really challenging time, right? We know that artificial intelligence, AI, is and has been predicted to be the largest disruptor of in our experiences in our lifetime, right? And we know firsthand that as educators are thinking about incorporating tools like AI, it seems to be even more significant than the internet itself, right? And I want to be clear that I think AI continues to be a potential um, benefit for many of our students, particularly our students of color, right? The access to resources in a way that we've never had before. I think it's something to be shared, acknowledged, and understood by educators and administrators. We also know that it actually has and it continues to potentially harm our students, from being accused of unethical sort of behaviors and usage or
Hmm.
uses of an AI to, as we sort of started to see some of the trends of students misusing the technology.
Right.
So here's the thing, though. Here's sort of the opportunity. Here's the sort of the thing that I get excited about. That if used, if we teach our students, if we teach our staff, and if we teach schools how to use AI responsibly, how to
Mhm.
consider whether or not the tools are being vetted through an equity lens, or whether they're we're reviewing those tools in a way that actually provides benefit to our students. If we can do that, if we can kind of incorporate that narrative and that sort of that space for schools and administrators, then I feel like this is like any other tool, right? That educators will know how to use it, they'll know how to adopt it with their students, and schools and administrators and districts across the country will recognize that actually there are some benefits and there's some potential to support our students as they learn and grow. So, but I say that if, because that if is so, it's I see this pattern emerge quite a bit where I see there's a technology that comes out. Schools, because they have so much on their plate, will react to it by banning the tool itself. And then they'll start to sort of realize that there are some benefits to it. And then they'll go back to kind of square one, where they'll start to kind of tinker and look at the benefits of these tools. And then there's all these guidelines for how to use it and engage with it. But the through line and the opportunity that's missed in the entire experience is starting with our students. And that is, if we're able to teach literacy skills to our kids in that time, if we recognize that these tools actually have benefit for some of our most vulnerable students,
Mhm.
um, then students might be, then teachers and educators might be a little bit more equipped to engaging in those tools a little bit more effectively. So.
Yeah, and I think about the things that we've taught in school over time, whether it be when we were sitting on the other side of the desk or today, and the point for us being there, and the point for us, nurturing these little minds that are in front of us, is to prepare them for a life when they're not in front of us anymore, right? And it is true that the children that are in school now will most definitely use AI in some capacity in their work life, out in the world in the future. It will be there, and it will, by the time the youngest of them get out there, it will be very well embedded into the society that they live in. It's almost a responsibility of schools and educators to help kids learn how to use it in a way that is smart and in a way that is safe, so that they learn it well, so that they're able to compete out in the world when they get out there, and whether it be in their college years or whether it be in their work life. So it's incumbent upon us to learn how to use this well, right?
I mean, absolutely, right? I mean, what do we say as educators, that like we're preparing our kids today for jobs that we don't know exists for tomorrow, right? This lovely quote that often I hear in
Yeah.
education circles. I want to double down on that and say that teaching AI literacy and supporting our entire communities to understand not only the usage of AI, but just tools in general, like having a very specific narrative, having an approach, having some guiding principles is key to that, Lisa. And I find that that's not always the case, right? That we need to remove ourselves from being so reactive to these tools and recognize that there are some very clear skills that are we can help to support our students with, and that is things like helping our kids recognize bias in some of these tools, I mean, come on, we've seen it, right? I think Google sort of created they course corrected, right? When we look up what a white doctor was, now they sort of like now every sort of spectrum of color doctor is now on some of these tools.
Right.
And so we need to teach our kids like, hey, listen, what you're seeing is not really a reality when you look at some of the images. Like we need to, that critical thinking is key, right? I think I think future employees want to see that. We need to recognize that we need to teach sort of our kids what these algorithms, what sort of the way in which things work, how AI actually works, some of the foundational knowledge. And I would sort of just encourage schools and even teachers out there to say, what is my own sort of learning gap? How is it that I'm using this tool to help benefit my students, particularly students that just don't have that access and some of those resources at home? And let me give
Right.
you kind of a quick narrative. A number of weeks ago, I was interviewing a student, black student that was a senior in high school, and he said, you know, Jamie, I use ChatGPT because I don't have the resource at home. Like my auntie and my grandma aren't always there for me to help me out with my math or my social studies work. So I need that back and forth with someone. And I found this bot to be really, really helpful. I mean, that was real. That was honest. That was very raw to me. And so when I asked him, um, how how do your teachers sort of engage with that? Sort of like how do they respond when you tell them that that's the sort of support? And they had to cover it up, right? And he had to cover it up and say, "Oh, well, I can't let them know that because they're going to accuse me of cheating," right? And
Mhm.
so I think we need to sort of move away from sort of that binary kind of relationship that we have with tools like AI, and
Yeah.
think how some of these tools can actually benefit some of our students in that sense. So.
And that kind of falls to the educator piece of this, right? It's to not first of all make the worst assumption about why kids are using the tool, to not immediately jump there because maybe they're not cheating. I've heard some teachers using this in very specific ways to help kids learn skills. So, for instance, we did an interview a little while back that the teacher was talking a little bit about in writing papers. They were talking about AI being used to plagiarize. Well, instead of taking that route, the teacher had the kids write papers and then directly put them into ChatGPT and have ChatGPT search for the weak spots in the paper. So it was like an editor to the paper, and I thought that was genius because now this tool is being used to go over a paper that the kids maybe aren't so sure are great papers. And ChatGPT is going to pull out spots that need work, and the kids can then take that paper and improve upon that paper using the tool that is made for such a thing, and their papers will be better as a result, and they'll have learned where their weak spots were in the paper. I thought it was brilliant.
Absolutely right. I mean, that's such a great story, right? And just this idea that in each of those cases, what I really loved is that there's critical thinking, right? That there's like this sort of back and forth on that. There is this idea of iteration, right? That as educators, particularly if I'm an English teacher, I want my kids to be able to understand that the writing process is not just sort of a one and done, that
Hmm.
it does sort of take this sort of back and forth, this connection that you have. But
Right.
again, I truly want to empathize with where teachers are at because, educators are really overwhelmed, right? We're seeing sort of budget constraints taking place in our education system, and so they have to work with less, right? And the second thing is we don't have administrators that are equipped to understand sort of the guidance, and they don't have a foundation or principles for how to look at some of these tools. I get asked this all the time, and Common Sense gets asked this, like, what are some of the AI guiding principles, or what are
Hmm.
the ways in which we need to look at AI? We're very adamant of that. This needs to be we need to ensure that our privacy is being upheld. We need to
Hmm.
ensure that our kids are knowing the literacy component. We need to be able to respect sort of the idea that there should be fairness and sort of kids' safety in mind when we think about some of these tools. But but if you are a teacher that doesn't have guidance from your administrator or your district, and everyone's waiting for that revision, and you're seeing firsthand that your students are using this tool in the way that you sort of described, I mean, that's a tension, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, do I suspend the child or do I like celebrate him or her for giving, working with what's in front of them. So
Right, right. So you talk about AI literacy, and we've got literacy, we've got media literacy, we've got like news literacy, all of these types of literacy that people have been talking a lot about, say like over the past 10 years or so, maybe just basic literacy for a little bit longer. How does AI stack up, and what are those principles that we need to be looking out for? Because that's a part of the literacy, are the principles, the principles that we need to look at to know, are we literate in this type of technology? So what's happening around this space? Does literacy mean, and what are the principles that guide us?
yeah, and let me give a quick plug for Common Sense. We have some amazing AI literacy lessons for middle and high school educators. So I encourage you to go to our site for that. These are pretty much quick grab and go lessons and activities that can kind of help to support critical thinking skills in AI. What I mean when it comes to AI literacy are three areas. The first is ensuring that our students know what actual AI is and how it works, right? We want to just, at the very foundational level, we want to be able to equip our students to say, when you're using a particular tool that embodies a chatbot, or when you're using a particular tool that helps enhance sort of your work, understand that there's a computer behind that, right? And let's recognize that as you learn that, the second sort of principle, or the areas that we want to address are, what are the benefits of using that, right? What are the actual risk of using it?
Mm-hmm.
In one of our lessons that we describe AI bias, and we keep it really intentional by saying this isn't right or wrong, but this is something that you need to evaluate as you think about using some of these tools. And I think the third thing that I think is really helpful, and I think this is probably the most important, is we want to ensure that our kids are thinking critically about how to use AI in this case, both responsibly and ethically, right? And what does it mean to actually do that? And let me give you another quick example. I was recently privy to a school district in Southern California that whose students, a particular student was using deep fakes and using AI to manipulate images of young women at the school.
Mm,
And while that in and of itself is obviously unethical, there's a number of reasons why that is, that there should be proper consequences of using someone's images. What I really struggled with in reading that article and thinking about that space is that I wondered to what extent that child actually knew what they were doing when they were importing some of those images and manipulating some of those images. I wonder also, as I thought about, what would that look like if that student was a student of color? How different would that experience have actually looked like if they were using AI? And so
right.
I'm seeing it in twofold. One is there's a huge equity gap, right? Is that like if I'm using a tool to understand AI and support that, and two is if I misuse that, what are the consequences that are sort of given to me? Let me give you another sort of like reference point, just so you kind of are aware of like this tool and AI literacy. Um, the work that Denise Pope has done through the Stanford School of Education, I believe her organization is called Challenge Success. I loved her work, and one of the things that they've reported that they were sharing that I think roughly about 60 to 70% of high school students had reported engaging in some type of cheating behavior during their previous month. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that's really interesting. But if you combine that with the Department of Education's like civil rights data collection, that oftentimes, and what that group has sort of done, that the U.S. Department of Ed has sort of discovered, is that they've consistently sort of demonstrated that like student discipline disproportionately sort of involves students of color, right? And so if I'm thinking about AI and I'm thinking about students misusing it, and I'm thinking about who then actually then gets whose consequences are sort of like served or amplified a little bit more. Right away, I'm thinking that there needs to be principles adopted to teach our kids how to use it appropriately, how to think about it critically,
Mm-hmm.
but also for our educators to think there needs to be a wide spectrum of how we're using it and how we're supporting our students along the way. So
Right.
a little long-winded, Lisa, but
That's good.
it's that's the idea. So
So when we're talking about like the thorny equity issues for kids here, we're thinking about um, at first step, like equity of access, who has access to the tools that they can use, whether it be at home or whether it be in school. And on the flip side of that, you were talking about the student story, even access to support at home and how the chatbot, was helping a student do their schoolwork. But then we're also talking about the equity piece where what the bots are feeding back to them. And we're talking about the images that when you put in, when you say are looking for an image of a black man or black woman or a black boy, black girl, you're getting some pretty racist stereotypical images out of some of the bots, especially early on. And then we had our overcorrection mentioned earlier, where we got some images that were just silly. Um, and then the next step of it is in use of AI, because it's still really the Wild West. Discipline in the schools is different and inequitable based on who you are using it, based on whether it's a white child or a child of color in the school using it, and discipline and consequences are being assigned differently depending upon the race or color of the child's skin. So there's a lot of thorny equity issues involved in AI in schools that people may not be thinking about.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just so layered, right? And I can kind of see if I'm a school principal, like all I want to do is just like go in the closet and, wait till this AI passes, right? I feel it, right? I mean, as an administrator, I have to deal with this on top of all the things that I have to work on. But
Hmm.
I want to make sure that I paint a much more broader picture for school leaders and educators, and that is there's quite a bit of opportunity. And there's quite a bit of ways that, if used appropriately, if introduced appropriately to our students in our community, can really benefit our students. And I
Hmm.
just want to name a few that, just so if you are listening in on this, you feel like it's not all doom and gloom.
Hmm.
And there is a way that you can kind of get out of sort of what we sort of consider this like AI mess, right? The first is um, if I'm thinking about AI, I'm thinking about the tools that I want to vet, and that is looking closely at what these AI tools do for my students, and whether or not I can use them in a way that actually can help sort of accelerate sort of the learning process. I want to look at these tools as a teacher and ask myself, is this going to help to reduce my workload given everything that I have to do? If you're an administrator and listening in on this, I'm thinking I have to write a number of community emails or a parent newsletter that takes up the majority of my time. Can I help? Can AI help me to reduce that workload? Right. So I think there's something to be said about the efficiency and vetting tools that actually work for students.
Right.
And I think one of the things Common Sense does really, really well at is um, rating and reviewing what those tools are. In fact, recently we partnered um, with OpenAI to help to review and rate some of the tools on their chat GPT store. Just so we know that we're considering that when we're looking at tools, we want to make sure that we're always keeping kids in mind. We want to make sure that families are aware of the pitfalls and the benefits of these tools. And for educators, we want to ensure that there is some merit to using some of these tools, right? That there is a
Mm.
way to look at them through a critical lens. So I say that that's a really a potential benefit and opportunity I think that AI does present. The second is around student agency. I started our interview with saying like I want to speak on behalf of
Yeah.
students, and at Common Sense we were really thinking about that, right? What is good for families? What can benefit students in their way? And what I would do is just as you pointed out, I would really attempt to highlight what those use cases, those positive use cases are, and introduce that to students. Right? We want to introduce them with the literacy skills, like you got to know like that there's bias out there, or you got to be aware that you just can't copy and paste something on ChatGPT and turn it in. Uh, but you also have to recognize that there's some students doing some really amazing work out there. It's and so I do want to make sure that educators and communities know that we weigh in both sort of those options by vetting the appropriate tools and highlighting ways that our students can actually use it to benefit their overall learning. So,
Yeah, it seems like
sorry, Lisa, I get all excited. So,
yeah, but you're making me think. I'm thinking like an educator. I'm thinking, well, easiest way to me, it seems, is, first, like you talked about, like getting the tools and getting the tools in front of teachers and kids that we have already critically thought about. We've thought about the goal that we want to meet, and we found the tools that will meet the goal if used properly. So not just a hodgepodge of random AIs that are popping up everywhere and random bots. Like, let's really investigate the tool and make sure that we have the right tool for what we want to do first. And then the education piece comes in, right? For both. So teachers need a little PD on this. Teachers need to understand what the tool does too. And teachers need to understand the possibilities. Like, how can you use this with kids? And also be encouraged to think outside the box, because we haven't discovered all of the ways yet that we can use AI or these AI tools to make learning to better and to amp up what kids can learn, to move the needle. And the potential is there, but we're the creative people that have to come up with it. The educators have to do it. So think about different ways that this bot can now do it, and try it yourself before you put it in front of kids. And the third piece I'm thinking about as you're talking is to stop kids from getting in trouble using AI tools. They really need to know what is a good use and what is not a good use, like how to be a good digital citizen in the AI space, right? So these are the things that you would get in trouble for if you used AI for these things. This is what is bad, and this is why. And these are the implications of doing that thing and the consequences. But if you use it the right way as a good digital citizen, here are all the beautiful, amazing things that you can do, and you will not be in trouble for doing these things. And here's why. And explain that to kids. Don't just expect them to know what they can and can't do in these digital spaces.
absolutely. I mean, geez, we should turn the interview over so you can actually roll this experience. But you and I are speaking the same language, and I'm rolling
Right.
with that. You're absolutely right. I think it just needs to be very synchronized, right? I think, as you pointed out, we're going to start as a community by sharing what the vision statement is for our community. So if we work with a community that needs extra support, we are going to say, and we choose to adopt a tool like AI or any other ed tech
Mhm.
tool, we want to be clear with our community, which is we are going to use it for this purpose with this vision, right? It's up to our school leaders to sort of adopt those visions based on what those, overarching school community or district sort of needs are. If
Right.
we're at a state level, we want to be very clear about what those sort of goals are. The second thing is we want to sort of equip our teachers, as you pointed out, not only with PD, but with a use cases that help them reinforce the demands that they have in the classroom. So if you have to meet a certain state standard by a certain time, here's how this tool can help you
Right.
address it, or not, right? Like, here's where we have to cut sort of our, understand the limitations of some of these tools like AI. If you work with students that have an IEP, we want to recognize that the work can actually be beneficial to sort of make your workflow a little bit more efficient,
Mhm.
knowing that solely relying on those tools to help you reinforce that is inherently wrong, right? That you need a human behind that.
Mhm.
And then the third aspect, as you pointed out, that I just would double down on is we need to ensure that our families are and our students are introduced to these tools in a way that helps them recognize the realities of what their students actually have to go through, right? If I'm a parent and I'm
Mhm.
working all day, or if I'm an auntie or if I'm a grandma and I'm like, what the hell type of math are you doing today? Then I need to recognize and I need to be able to quickly know what tools can actually help to benefit my grandchild or
Mhm.
my child, right? And the school needs to be okay with that. The teachers need to be okay with that. There's such a disconnect that no one is speaking the same language. Like, let's just be real for a second and recognize that there's so many other things happening in our kids' lives in addition to school, right? Particularly our kids of color. It's just like, that's not right, right? We need to do a much better job of recognizing the realities and the opportunities that tools can use for our particular students. Geez, I feel like I'm like my old grandmother, just like scolding teachers. That's not at all what I'm trying to do. It's just giving some clear guidelines, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being able to support both our families, our educators, and our school leaders. So.
Yeah, and thinking about families, I think first of all the vision that they come to this space with in AI, I'm going to assume the best vision is going to be already informed by student agency, by community agency, by families, and talking about what they need already. So the vision should be informed by that. So all of these pieces should come together. Everybody should be a part of this. Where these are our needs, and the meet those needs, and that's why we're implementing these tools and the things going down. But heading back to parents, things are getting more complicated, and it's different than when like our parents were trying to help us do like math homework, especially. These chatbots can also help parents that have no idea how to do the new math problems, and they can type in like, how do I do this problem using this math? And I bet there's a chatbot out there that can tell them how to help them do, help their child do homework. And all the ways that we use this is amazing.
I mean, absolutely right. But families don't get off the hook. And this is where I think both Common Sense does a really good job of this, right? We want to make sure that, just like educators, we want to ensure that our families are aware of like not only how to use these tools, but what those inherent biases are, what the policies are around unethical behavior and using AI tools or other tools. Also exploring, helping families understand agency and how to talk to teachers about evolving tools. I've seen this a lot where, all of a sudden kids will come home and they'll be front loaded with all these ed tech tools. And the parents are like, how do I even log into this thing? Right. No wonder there's so many instances of kids like punching their Chromebooks. Right. I don't know if it's out of frustration or anger. But I do recognize that there needs to be the feedback loop and the communication loop around some of these tools between teacher and parent. uh, that bridge needs to be solidified a little bit more, right? So there is some transparency. I
Mhm.
often recommend that teachers do once a month reach out to families and to say these are some of the ways I'm using technology in my classroom. If you are interested in learning more about what this tool does, here's an office hour, here's a really good link on how you can incorporate that.
Right.
But I hear that. I do think the final piece for families, though, is, as you pointed out, is this agency piece. It is really, in many ways, up to our teachers to recognize what our kids are actually doing, both with AI and be very clear and set those sort of boundaries around what AI is not to be used for, and to help families understand where and how to draw those lines at home. Right? I do see when I talk to parents, geez, they're overwhelmed. I mean, we all are. There's like a new AI tool like coming out of our ear and every few days. So we want to be
Yeah.
able to recognize kind of where there's challenges for each of those tools. So.
Yeah, and that's when it comes all the way full circle back to making this about tools, right? We can't use the tools just for the sake of the tool or just because it's a new tool. We have to have a purpose driving the choice to use the tool, and keep in mind, especially as educators, to not overwhelm parents with what we're choosing to use in the classroom just because we want to try it. Like, is there a reason to use this tool? Is it a good reason to use this tool? Do I have to? Do I have to add another tool to my menu of tools that I'm going to use in the classroom? And does it really serve a different purpose than what I'm already using? And if we continue to overwhelm parents, we're going to see frustration. But if we, like you said, like give them the tools that they need to understand what we're using and why, and don't feed them tech tools with a fire hose, we have a better chance of having a dialogue back and forth about what's happening in the classroom, and making it a more positive experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wonder if it's not even a fire hose these days. Like a AI is like this introducing like this chocolate cake or something, right? Where it looks so sweet, like, but once you start taking a few bites into it, you're just like, what? This is too much, right? This is overwhelming.
Very rich.
Um,
Um,
right. You're right, though. I think, Lisa, you have some wonderful points around what it is for our families to understand and access these tools. I think we're at Common Sense, we've been known as a child advocacy group for so long. And one of the things that I feel like Common Sense does really well at is helping families vet and understand media and tools. And one of the really great things that we offer is not only some great articles, but also some really great talking points that families can have with their kids around ed tech tools in general. And you see that in many of our lessons. We have conversation starters that families have can use at home. We have unique ways that we can start to adopt social emotional wellness. So as our kids are grappling with the stresses associated with AI tools or any other tools, we can help our families develop some of those kind of core skills of, how do you talk about resiliency in a way that is natural at the dinner table, or how can
Right.
you talk to your kids about self-regulating when you're in the car with them, right? These tools that I think families can certainly benefit from. I do think we owe it to our families to not only educate them, but also ensure that we are mindful of their realities and can infuse conversations, insights in a way that works for them in the moment. So,
Hmm.
because ain't nobody going to talk about like, don't use AI tools to cheat. If the child is stressed out, like last
Right.
minute or whatever the thing is, I want to recognize those realities that do exist in those spaces as well.
Hmm.
So,
And it's always a
yeah.
temptation, right? There's always a
Oh,
temptation that something can do it there for you. Um, and you can take the easy way out. So you have to be educated so that you know why you shouldn't, and so that you don't. Um,
yeah. And educators, I think, on the call today, as you think about what you could do as a next step, um, I always recommend this. Take a moment to assess your students. Like, take a step back from all the tech tools that you're using, if indeed you're using tech, and survey your students. Ask them 3 questions. What are the tools that you're using at home to help you with your assignment? If you are an elementary teacher, how can your parents, what are the tools that you use at home to help you with your reading, right? The second thing, once you get that feedback, is to assess, are the tools that I'm using, whether it's AI tools, whether they're district approved, or whether I'm doing this on the side in my closet and logging in for my personal account, are they actually helping my students? And if they are, how do I know that? And then the third thing that I might recommend is, as we just finished having this conversation, is, do you have a really good relationship with your kids' families? If you don't, take the weekend to think about what a subtle message would look like, what something small would look like, to provide your families with those links, a real quick resource. Now, you might say, Jamie, this is not going to help any of my kids because I don't have that feedback from my families, or I don't have that response from my students, or I don't have that trust from my students.
right,
But now is the day. I mean, it's April. Like, this is a great day to reset. So,
right, right. Yeah.
yeah,
And you know what? If we're not seeing this until later in the year and it's near the end of the school year, it's a great time to start thinking about how to begin a new school year. Um, and say, like, what would I do differently next year, and how would I introduce these tools a little differently to families and get that
abs-
communication going. So it's
absolutely right. Yeah.
never the
And
wrong
we will
time.
see. Yeah. We'll also see that the industry will eventually catch up, right? We see in the state of California that there's legislation being sort of introduced that limits and that accounts for the issues around privacy, those ethic issues. I want to be really, really transparent and honest about the fact that many of these AI tools, if looking closely at their privacy policies,
Hmm.
they're not meeting the standards that we need to see, right? We want to ultimately protect our students' privacy and ensure that our kids are that information is not being shared in the sort of the greater sort of scope of what AI is. And I think until legislation catches up to the evolution of AI, I do think if you are a school district or a school leader really waiting, it is imperative to recognize that this is already taking place, but also recognize that legislation still needs to catch up
Right.
with protecting our kids in that space. So it's a little bit legalese, but come on, like we need to just make sure that if if we are ensuring that our kids, we are protecting FERPA or some of these privacy sort of rules, we need to ensure that like any tool is held to that same standard, right? And
Right.
AI tools shouldn't be any different than any other tools that we introduce in the classroom. So.
When we're looking at tools, what are some of the things that we should be looking for? What are those principles that common sense would suggest that we, as a school administrator, as an educator, what standards should we hold those AI tools up to?
That's a great question. We have a wonderful rubric system at Common Sense, the education arm. When we rate and engage and assess tools, ed tech tools or AI tools, we're looking at a number of things. The first is we're looking at the level of engagement. Is the level of engagement, can we scaffold that in a way that actually helps support our students? Or are we perpetuating that frustration that students and teachers have with the tool? We're looking at pedagogy, right? Can actually teachers see a clear use case on how to use that tool in the classroom? I mean, these like any other tools, as you pointed out at the very beginning, can often be very shiny, right? It's like, here's your lesson, or we've just adopted your new, essay for you, but does it actually have benefit to kids? And if they don't, then we need to think differently about it. As it comes to equity, we need to ensure that, and we rate around support, right? Are these, can students actually track things like their progress? Does the tool integrate with other aspects of their work, right? Does it actually help the community thrive? Again, those are some broad questions, but we're really asking, is it supporting students at the end of the day? And if so, how do we know that that's what's taking place? And what I often recommend, or what often we say, is number one is trusting your gut is usually a really good baseline. Teachers are obviously gone through their profession and they understand their students best. We want to make sure that we're both looking at a tool through the perspective of both students and teachers. And I might add, also ensuring that that tool is actually supporting the family connection, as we talked about. And then the final piece is like, is it clear? Is what we're trying to use the tool for, is it clear? Does it have an end goal? We were laughing about this offline, Lisa, but this idea of like when we were in school, the PowerPoint slides that would fly in and everything that was glittery, right? Remember those days? And while those times are gone, and hopefully no one out there is still using the flying technique when they're importing a transition on their slides, hopefully you look at yourself in the mirror today and you say, is this tool authentically helping my child prepare for a future both that exists, but a future that exists where they are empowered, not simply by using it, but to use it in a way that can actually benefit themselves, their community, and society at large. So.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that it is a really smart thing for teachers to ask questions and administrators to ask those questions, because I've had parents ask those questions. And you better be able to answer those questions when parents come and ask why you're using this tool. You need to be able to answer that question. You need to know why you're using the tool, not just because it's jazz hands and sparkles. It's like, not because it's fun. They want to know, why are you doing this? Why do I have to learn this? Why is there another log on? What's the point? Can't you just do this with paper? And we don't do a whole lot with paper anymore. Couldn't you do this with a Google Doc? Maybe. But here's why I've chosen this tool, and let me show you why it's different. And if you can do that, then you're great. But if you can't do that, you probably shouldn't be using the tool to begin with.
Absolutely, right. And in saying that, teachers may have a feeling of may feel overwhelmed. Like, where do I start? Like, Jamie, you gave me things I can do with my students, but where do I start as a professional? And what I would recommend, we're coming out next month with an AI literacy course that helps teachers understand some of the foundation of using AI, some of the history of AI, but also use cases, something that can benefit them as professionals and with their students. We sort of will highlight how to vet those tools, as we sort of spoke about today. But I would equip and take 45 minutes to learn and equip yourself with how to use these tools in a way that helps you as a professional. With respect to parents, again, I point to common sense because we've done for many, many years a great job of reviewing apps, videos,
Mhm.
tools. I would turn to us. You don't have to do the work. Like, look at our rubric, copy and paste that rubric, and use it as your own as you vet tools for your classroom, whether that's a book or whether that's the latest AI tool. I highly encourage folks to use our content. And then the final piece that I would really, really recommend, and this is just something that often we don't see, right, is uh, ask your students to describe how they use AI tool and where they get confused on, right? The hope here is that we can learn from our students about how they're using these tools to better their overall well-being. I won't, I encourage you all or teachers to really not only ask, but I want them to feel, and these are teachers, I want them to feel like that in amplifying student voice in AI use, like then students will actually feel empowered to understand kind of how they can use it in the classroom. Let me just kind of give you a hypothetical, something that I would envision. I see this all the time where you see teachers that are very binary in their rules, right? If you use AI, you're going to fail, right? And good for those teachers. I commend you for having such a strong sort of position. But what I'm very curious about is like if they're absent from all the nuances, like do you know that your child or that student is using AI when they're correcting email? Do you know that when you're on a group chat on a Google Doc, AI is being a part of that? Like having such sort of like binary language prevents kids from understanding um, the potential uses of it. And our kids aren't prisoners, right? Like you're not trying to catch them, like you're not using Turnitin as a gauge or a judge for how students are doing. Like we need to think differently about how our students are using it and then highlight those great examples. Put that up on the assembly wall, right? Like highlight them at your next sort of meeting with your students. Like that is the crux. That is such a beauty. I've seen it when teachers highlight students in all the unique ways that they use it. I've seen it firsthand. That student like glows, right? That all of a sudden they become experts. And if you do that, particularly with our students of color who are already sort of have that disadvantage of like feeling like they're criminalized in our education system, like AI tool is not just the next thing that they're corroborating on. The AI is actually their friend, their benefit, their connection. And I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of someone that advocates for AI because I do think that there's some very clear problems and challenges. I'm simply saying, let's understand the tool, let's understand why it's used in a way that's beneficial, and
Mhm.
let's highlight when that's actually happening. So,
Mhm. Do you have any suggestions about how to address some of those equity issues? Or, when we've talked many times throughout our conversations, we've gone back over to kids of color and the equity issues they're facing. Do you have any suggestions for any schools, district, parents, teachers that are really concerned about equity problems in AI and tech?
yeah, one of the things that I recently spoke about at the South by Southwest conference and some of the wonderful work that is coming out of Common Sense um, sort of maybe will lead me to these 6 points. And I'm sorry if it's a little long-winded, but I'll be really clear with it. Particularly our students of color. One of the things that I would encourage educators and schools to know is assess how well do we know the realities of our students and their learning. Um, and and one of the really interesting ways, easy ways that you can do that is by asking them, what are all the tools that you use to complete any given assignment? And who is actually helping to support you at home, right? It's
Mm,
two very basic questions that you can assess what the merits of the AI tool or any tool
right.
and understand who the support systems are. I mean, we know this, Lisa, that it can be very challenging to ask those questions because there's a level of trust or mistrust that students often have with their teacher. But being authentic and asking them what are the ways in which our students use those tools. The second is I encourage teachers to think about how they are using AI and how they are teaching AI literacy. Again, I want to come back to that. Is everyone aware of what the tool is, how to use it, and who's not benefiting from that? We know historically that kids that have limited access to technology don't do as well, right, as students. If you don't have access to the AI tool or the paid version of the AI tool, then you are likely not to have it. Or if you don't have the right bandwidth, right? These are all sort of foundational things. If I'm doing my homework on my phone compared to like my nice laptop, all
Exactly.
of that has that. So one of the recommendations that I would have is to ensure that we are teaching kids the entire foundation, all of our kids, but primarily our kids that are grappling, our students of color that may or may not be aware of what these tools, how these tools can actually benefit them and their overall well-being, right? I'll give you a quick use case on this one. There's a wonderful AI tool that can help students with their literacy, and that is helping students read. So if a child doesn't have an adult at home that can actually help them to read, an AI tool can actually help to assess what words that they're using or what words that they're missing out. What a wonderful example of a tool that can potentially help a child if they don't have it at home, right? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
easy would it be to just share that with families and say, this is something that you can use at home, and this is something that we're assessing your child's overall well-being, right? So I would encourage the second piece is both the AI literacy tool, assessing whether or not the tool is beneficial, but also AI literacy as a whole for all of your students, particularly our kids. And then, I do have some other points, but let me just kind of summarize it with the final piece, which is as a Latino male, one of the things that I've always struggled with is having to be the conduit between school and the class and home.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were very adamant about um, not purposely retaining the culture and only speaking Spanish in the presence of others, because my parents wanted to really hone us and make us proud of our language and our culture, right? And so it was very difficult to be the translator
Mm,
for our students. And I think back, not about AI tools, but I think of the student that has to navigate adult spaces,
right.
both for families and not. And I'm speaking beyond just like language, right? I'm speaking of that Black student that is really struggling with how to uh, tell their parents that they need support with something, right? I'm thinking of that Latino student that doesn't know how to translate an ed tech tool and has to be the email support for that parent, right?
Mm,
And so my encouragement to teachers, if you work with students of color, is to recognize the many layers that go into communication between parent and home, and
mhm.
to ease that tension, ease that connection for families, right?
Right.
I The child should not have to be the translator at a parent teacher conference, right?
Mm,
uh,
absolutely.
Build up enough resources and confidence, or don't do it and figure out how to do it. But the onus is on the school, not the child or the parent, to
Right.
understand the communication, right? Let's be real about that. So, and that's true for ed tech tools, right? Don't make it a barrier to entry for our kids of color to understand, and don't demonize that if your child is trying to get ahead, essentially. So.
Right.
Sorry, Lisa. I was going to be long-winded, but I wanted to make sure that I hit on that. So,
No, that was great. That was great. It falls right in the strike zone of the things that we care about most. So I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, you're giving me, I have anxiety just thinking about, kids have anxiety anyway, thinking about a parent teacher conference. Imagine being told that you have to sit there and translate it. Absolutely not. But hit some great points there that, when we have these conversations, we have to really think beyond just the thing. There's so many layers. There's so many other complicated things, nuances that exist for a lot of kids that we have to try to make it easy to have these conversations, easier anyway, to provide access and provide information for kids, for parents, for families, and as far as we can get in order to make this a really smooth transition into something that is absolutely going to happen. AI is part of our lives, whether we like it or not. and we all have to get on board, um, and do it the best way we can. And I've looked at some of your resources on Common Sense for AI, and for many other things over the years, and absolutely agree with you that parents, districts should find their way to the site to check out some of the rating systems and see what people are saying about each of the tools, about all of the things that you might be interested in on there. Now, I saw that there were some tools that you've already rated. Could you tell us, before we have to go today, what are some, if we were going to start today and say I haven't touched them yet, and you were going to recommend to me as a teacher or an admin, like where are some of the tools where I should start because they're some of the best ones you've seen? What would those tools be?
Oh, that's a great one. And let me just do a sort of one final plug for Common Sense and their AI initiative. I think our initiative, you will find on our site a number of things that we spoke about today. I think the first thing is that if you're an administrator or teacher, you will see that we're reviewing AI products, right? And so we want to make sure that if you are struggling with a particular tool, that you know that you can turn to our site and see that. I spoke briefly about some of the AI principles that you asked about, and included in our AI initiative, we have a set of 8 solid principles that I encourage you to sort of look at. This is the way sort of we assess AI tools and products. The third thing I want to just point out is our AI literacy lessons, and I encourage teachers to go through our AI literacy lessons as a foundation for how to engage their students with AI and tools in particular. With respect to the ed tech tools that are out there, oh geez, there's so many. One of the things that we've seen, I can give you a number of them, but I'll name 2 that I really like, or I'll name actually 3 for teachers. There's a really great tool. Conmigo is a wonderful tool that I encourage, and that's the reason I like Khan Academy's sort of version of their AI chatbot with Conmigo is they are really intentional about ensuring that there's privacy in mind, that they're always aware of how the tool is actually speaking to the particular child. Again, there's still risk involved, but I really like Conmigo as a whole. It's a wonderful tool. Magic School AI is another wonderful tool that we've rated, and that is a tool that helps educators with all the things necessary to go into the front of the classroom. So from lesson planning to writing a parent note. One of the reasons that the tool is beneficial, again, we want to be mindful of privacy. We want to be mindful of the way the tool is actually being incorporated. But one of the things that can help teachers is help to use AI to structure some very basic documents, right? If you need some notes to write a letter of recommendation, it does a really great job of honing in on what that content is. I encourage that. And then, geez, there's so many folks that are probably going to put me on the spot, but go to our site because it's great. There's a number of tools. Ello is a really interesting tool. It's a AI reading tutor I think I spoke about. It does a really great job of incorporating and supporting students with some of those basic skills. It does a lot of recognition, proprietary sort of speech recognition, so it helps to sort of listen to what the reader's actually saying or as they're sharing a particular word, and helps them course correct. So I encourage folks that are struggling or maybe using literacy tools or reading tools to look at Ello as a whole. So, but go to our site because it's really great, and there's more to obviously come. So,
Yeah,
and there's no plug-in. I'm not getting paid for any of these companies. It's just this is just like Jamie Nuñez speaking on usages and looking at how we've rated some of these tools on our site. So, comments.
and that's just where I was going to. It's not just the principles that are on the site. There's also a link that really digs into how the products were rated, and to get in there and say like, okay, well, here's our methodology and this is what exactly we were looking for. So for those skeptics there um, that are wondering how you go about that process, there's another link where you can go a little bit deeper and say after those principles and that shows how they assess, it comes back to say, all right, here's exactly what we're looking at when we're doing the review.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we hit on what it is, how it's going to actually work, some of the highlights of the tool. But the really benefit here is we don't shy away from what those harms and ethical risks are for teachers, right?
Mm,
So we go in and assess that. We look at limitations. We're looking at potential misusage of
right.
that. We're also looking at privacy, right? To see is this actually taking information that we don't want our students at. We're very, very critical of these tools. And this is not just Jamie likes it because it's nice and shiny. This is Common Sense does a wonderful job, and we're very intentional about adopting those principles into something that actually can work for
Mm.
teachers and students. So, yeah.
Yeah, and oftentimes I find, as over the years, as I've gone to Common Sense to look at ratings on different things, I find that for, Common Sense is much stricter about tools and about resources than I would ever be, either as a parent or as a teacher. So you can feel safe that if Common Sense says something is okay and age appropriate, it definitely is.
What's the inside thing? I think parents love us, kids hate us, right? Is sort of the common piece that
Right.
we often hear about Common Sense Media reviews. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing, and we are known in the education space. We're in roughly 70% of schools across the
Mhm.
country. We have well over 1 million educators using our free educational resources. So and it's free, right? I mean, there's
Right.
not a selling piece. It's like we really do care deeply about supporting the well-being of educators, supporting our families, and as we, say internally, we do take an entire whole community approach when we think about how it is that we're supporting our families and our educators to thrive in this digital space. So you don't think of us as your friend, right? I mean, it's not. It's we're really there to help our kids out. So.
Yeah, and we talked several times about how busy administrators and teachers are and how much pressure is on the job, especially now, especially with funding cuts and teacher shortages and all of the responsibilities that are on the heads of teachers and administrators. Use the resource that's there to help you get this out of your way. That if somebody is doing the review for you and the research for you, go in there and start there at least, right? It's free, and it's Common Sense Media is a resource that has a long history, and is very well respected. So again, I'm going to thank you for all of the work that you've done over the years, for everyone, and the work that you continue to do. And I know that we're brushing up against the end of the interview here, but is there anything else you'd like us to know that I haven't asked you about the work you're doing, about AI, about anything that you have upcoming, that you'd like to share?
Wonderful things happening out. So I would say please go to our site to look at our AI reviews and look at how we are adopting our AI initiatives. A lot more reviews coming. I encourage folks to look at our AI literacy lessons. If you're looking, I look at our digital citizenship lessons. If you're not aware of them, these are all free lessons addressing things like media literacy to how to address things like cyberbullying, in addition to AI. And then we have a wonderful AI course, a foundational course that it will be coming out next month. And I'll certainly share the link with you when we go live. But I encourage you all, if any of your educators are struggling with the foundations of what AI looks like, and I will just say, just take a breath, right? I mean, we're in such a strange moment in education. I wish I could give everybody a bottle of water or just a glass of wine or anything like that. But it's okay if you decide as a teacher today and you just don't want to use AI, or you are really thinking critically about just any ed tech tool. It's
Right.
okay to take a step back and say, I care deeply about the well-being of my kids. We know, right? AI was never intended with kids in mind, like any ed tech tool. And so we want to be cognizant that if you are a teacher and you are really struggling with whether or not to use AI in your classroom or in your professional life, it's okay to push pause on that and say,
Mhm.
I need to really assess what is the purpose and the intention behind this. So,
Right.
and you can always turn to common sense as a resource, as a tool, as a way to help to support that. And in my work with teachers and administrators across the western half of the United States, as well as what we do on the education side, we are always mindful of what we're trying to do with teachers, knowing that there's the realities of teaching are are far more complicated on whether or not we want to use AI or not. So.
Right. Exactly.
You got this. I'm your best cheerleader, right?
Well, thank you again for taking the time to talk with me today and to bring us such a wonderful interview, because we've learned so much and it's been so much fun talking to you. So I do hope to have you back again sometime, as AI in schools evolve and as you do some more coursework out there for teachers, so that we can revisit this topic and maybe some others. So I do hope you'll come back and join us. But thank you again for being here.
Wonderful.
And for the rest of you, if you enjoyed this conversation and conversations like it, please do like, share, follow, and subscribe, and come back and visit us for another EdPost conversation. Until then.
Lots of love, Lisa. Take care.